What's up, y'all? I'm Andy Story with Poster Grind. I design movie posters for a living as an art director, and today I want to show you a fun way, or rather a cool technique to make either logos or title treatments for movie posters. I'm hoping you learned something new in Photoshop on how to create this split effect, which was inspired by the actual movie Split. So this is kind of a recreation on how we're going to use multiple layers using type, adding some distressed grunge effects, and in the end coming up with a pretty cool logo. So let's dive on in.
What?
All right, guys, go ahead and fire up Photoshop. Make sure you are working on a horizontal template. Today I am using a 16 by 9 inch canvas with a 150 pixel per inch DPI. So if you guys want to follow along and do what I do, that's what I did. The other cool thing is today we're going to be making this logo that's going to be similar to the Split logo, which was used on the Split movie a few years ago. Now, I'm sure everybody that follows movies or graphic design has seen this style of typography in the past. And today I'm going to show you how to do that using Photoshop. Now, we could do this in Illustrator and it may be easier, but for today, we're going to do it in Photoshop and use a lot of masks. And this is going to be a perfect tutorial if you're new to using masks, or even if you are accustomed to using masks, then this is just going to solidify that skill set. So first things first, we're going to need some texture. I went ahead and pulled this texture from Envato.com. I have a yearly subscription, which is very affordable, and it comes with a commercial license. The other cool thing is that if you guys want to follow along, I will put the same exact name of this texture in the description below. Plus, if you guys sign up with them, we do get a small commission for referring business, so we do appreciate that. Now, as far as type goes, we're going to be using Dharma Gothic E-Type, which can be found in the Photoshop type library, so feel free to activate that. We're pretending this is a mock scenario, and the name of the movie is The Divided, and it's going to be very similar to the Split logo, and the whole purpose of this is to kind of show you different ways to do the split technique. First thing first, we can go ahead and hide the, because that will not be affected today. We're just going to be using the divided typography. Now, we're just going to need to make a mask, so go down to your bottom right or wherever you have your layers and hit the mask icon, and now we have a mask created. And throughout this tutorial, we're just going to be making slices in and out of this whole entire logo using the polygonal lasso tool. So go up your upper left, bypass the lasso tool, and just make sure you're on polygonal. And the reason I want to do that is because it's easy to make slices, but make sure that we start in the right spot. So just want to make sure that we're like right around here. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine, so you guys can do kind of like whatever you want to do. But I think we'll do something like this for the first cut. And now we're just cutting this bottom part off. And now we have a selection. And now make sure that you're on a black secondary color over here, because we're going to get rid of the bottom. So go ahead and hit B, and then that toggles up your brush tool, and then hit X and make sure black is your secondary color. And now go over to your right and make sure you're selected on the mask and hit Command Delete, and that will paint the bottom part of your mask black. Now the cool thing is we can go ahead and hit Command J to create another layer or duplicate layer, and now hit Command D and get rid of that selection. And now on this layer, on this mask, we can go ahead and invert it by hitting Command I, and now that brings it back. But the top part is erased essentially behind the mask. And now hit V, and we can drop that down, and you can kind of see the slice that we just made. Now we got to keep on doing this all the way through with about 3 or 4 more slices. And to do that, it might get a little complicated. So first things first, go ahead and make another copy by hitting Command J. And now we're going to play with this bottom layer and do another cut. Now we'll use our polygonal lasso tool to go ahead and make a cut and get rid of the bottom section with a selection. And now we want to go back up to that top layer, the one that we just made, and get rid of this bottom part for now. And to do that, we just hit B for our brush tool, make sure we're at opacity 100 and flow 100, and we're going to get rid of this bottom part by painting black. And go ahead and hide that bottom layer that we just created. There we go. And now we can see that piece that we just made. Now go ahead and select that bottom layer one more time. Make sure that it's visible. And now we're going to do the same thing where we're going to cut this top part out. so that we have this other part here, and we can nudge that down. So on that mask, go ahead and hit Shift Command I, invert it, and now we're going to paint above here with black to get rid of that top layer part. And now hit Command D, and you can see what we did by removing these layers up top. And now we have that bottom part. Now we can nudge this down a little bit with your arrow key, and then bring back these other layers, and you can see what we just did. Or you could have kept them visible. There we go. So now we got to do another cut in here somewhere. So let's go ahead and get that polygonal lasso tool by hitting L. And now we got to get rid of the bottom part. So we're going to make another slice, and now we're going to paint away this section. And now we have that middle part. Go ahead and hit Command J, and we're going to bring down, or by hitting Command J, we're going to work on that bottom layer one more time. And now on this bottom section, we need to make this part visible. So we're going to go ahead and paint here to make that bottom part visible, and then paint above it to get rid of that top part, which is right here. So we need to get rid of that. So we can go ahead and make that top part invisible, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But for now, let's go ahead and paint in here with our white brush at full opacity and flow, then hit Command Shift I, and now we're inverted. We're going to get rid of this top part. So hit X and start painting with black, and now we have that top part completely disappeared. And now hit Command D, make your other layers visible, and now we can just drop down this layer. And now we're going to do this one more time to have one more slice in there. So we can go ahead and hit Command J, work on that bottom layer again, make sure it's selected, hit L for polygonal, and then let's go ahead and make that final cut. Let's go a little lower. All we have to do now is get rid of this top part, and we'll have our last piece. And to do that, we're going to invert our selection by hitting Shift Command I, and then we're going to paint this away with the brush at full opacity, like such. And now hit Command D and select all of our layers again. And now we can nudge this down by hitting V and the arrow key. Oh, and I forgot, we have to get rid of this top layer bottom part as well. So we can go up to that layer. We can hide that bottom layer just to see what we're painting. And then we're gonna just invert the selection so that we're only painting right here by Shift Command I. And now let's paint away this section with black. All right, there we go. Go ahead and hit Command D, and let's bring up that bottom section and go ahead and select it, and then we're gonna nudge that down. Let's take a look at all of our layers, and now we can see what we just did. It's pretty cool. It does get confusing. You're going back and forth using inverted selections and normal selections and lots of confusion. Let's take a look at that split logo to see what they did in here. And what they did is they added a little bit of shading in certain areas, and then they pushed some of the lettering to the left or the right and added kind of like that concrete texture. And to do this nice and easily, we're going to make a couple copies of that concrete texture, and then we're just going to use a clipping mask to clip this on top of each layer. We can make about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies by hitting Command J. And then we're just going to drop these down and then attach them to each layer by hitting Option Command G. And then we're going to do the same thing, Option Command G, Option Command G, Option Command G. And then I just remembered we're going to use some texture, so make one final copy of that concrete and just leave it up there, and we can just turn it off. And now we can just bring this down here, hit Option Command G. And now we have texture all over this. But we want to do the shadows too, just to give it a little bit of a layered effect. And we want to bring and kind of modify each one of these letter pieces right now, just by nudging them around. So I'm just going to go to that top one. I'm going to nudge this over a little bit. And then I'm going to go to that now bottom one and nudge this up. And maybe push it to the left a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the next layer. Maybe nudge it just a tiny bit and bring it up. And then finally on this bottom layer, bring that up. And maybe this one's going to be like that, just to make it a little different. And now with each layer, I'm just going to start painting in some shadow using a clipping mask to clip it to our type by hitting Option Command G again. And we're just going to use a brush to type or to paint in a shadow using black. And then we're going to lower the flow to around 3 so we can make it subtle. And then you just paint on that layer. Because it's clipped, it's going to stay within where we want it to stay, something like that. And I just want the shadow up on the top part, so I'm going to use my eraser, erase away a little bit of the middle like that. And I'm going to do the same thing to this bottom piece. So I'm going to go above it, new layer, clip it, Option Command G, and then just paint with my brush a little bit of shadow like that. Now let's go ahead and add just some variance in the lighting on top of the logo. So let's go ahead and group this all into its own separate folder. So hit Command G with all of the pieces. And then above that, we're just going to use an exposure and then clip that to the group by hitting Option Command G. And then let's pull up the exposure, meaning it's a little brighter, and then hit on the exposure mask, Command I, and we're going to mask and just paint back in some of that light just to make it look a little more dynamic. So using a brush with white on 4% flow, I'm just going to paint some of these areas above and maybe below a little bit like that, and then up here, just so that there's a little more interesting light. All right, looks pretty cool to me. So the next thing we're gonna do is just add texture, and the easy way to do that is using our same exact concrete. I totally forgot to add this in the tutorial. I got a little carried away, but I just wanted to mention, if you are having fun and learning something in this tutorial, please hit that like button now. I truly appreciate it. Thanks. That we used before, and turning this into a texture mask. And to do that, we're just going to double click, and that's gonna take us to a completely separate workspace. And then over in our layers, we're going to hit channels, and then we're just going to make a copy of one of these channels by dragging it to the plus, hit Command L, and then we're going to just create some serious contrast with our levels by Command L. And just go ahead and make sure that we have a lot of contrast by playing with these dials, something like that. And then we're going to make a selection by going to our selection window or drop down. And now we're going to go to select color range and then just click on the whitest part that you can find. And now it's going to select all of our whites, and you can play with the fuzziness, bring it up to about 112, hit OK, and now that's selected. Now over here on the right, we're going to go to layers and hit our mask, and it's going to mask out everything that we just selected. And now you can just drop this down, drag that layer back into our original Photoshop file. And now we have an awesome mask to play with. And we can drop this mask on top of our grouping and make a texture from the mask. Go ahead and turn off that layer, select the mask that we just created, hit Option, and drag that down to our type group. And now that's on top of our type. But we can't even read it now, but we can go ahead and fix that. And now invert the mask by selecting the mask, and now it's inverted. And the cool thing is we can move it around to where we want it. So to do that, we have to unlink it by just tapping that link and then hit Command T, zoom out, and now we have a mask to play around with, and you can just play with the size and scale as well. So I'm just going to look for something that looks kind of cool like that. And now I'm going to link it up again in case we move this so it doesn't get distorted. That the is looking cool, but let's go ahead and add some texture to the as well so that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. So hit Command J on that concrete layer, bring that down, and then we're just going to do the same thing, attach it to the using a clipping mask, which was Option Command G. And that looks pretty good. I could play around with this all day and get it looking a little closer to the split logo or making it look a little better, but at this point it's subjective, and I think everybody has figured out how to do this. And if you guys have learned something thus far, please hit that like button and feel free to subscribe so that you'll be notified when we have more awesome logo and poster, Photoshop, and Illustrator tutorials.